Hi, welcome to another video. This time we're talking about refactoring is a code smell. Let's have a look at code refactoring. In computer programming and software design, code refactoring is the process of restructuring existing computer code, changing the factoring. Notice there it says known as factoring is breaking a complex problem or system into parts without changing its external behavior. So you're dividing things into parts without changing external behavior, and you're doing that again and again. So you're changing kind of the structure, right? So renaming something, maybe the function name, splitting something into two functions, that sort of thing. Right, let's look at test-driven development. So we add a test, we run all tests, we write the simplest code that passes the new test, and that's where this comes in. We write the simplest code, that might be something just in a function. Inelegant or hard-coded, is acceptable, right? Okay, and then all tests you now pass because now you meet the specification of that test, and then you refactor. So now you're going to refactor that code, change the way the things work. So moving code to where it most logically belongs, removing duplicate code, splitting methods into smaller pieces, that sort of thing. So now you're refactoring. Okay, not necessarily behavior. We're talking about structure, right? Often it's structure. And then there's different camps on what you mean by that, because people say behavior, functionality, structure, architecture, factoring. These are kind of ambiguous when people really start thinking about things and having their opinions on whether this is right or wrong, whether they like something or don't like something with regards to this. Now I think that this is a code smell, and let's have a look at that. So refactoring is changing the factoring, not the functionality. And the problem here is that if you're not designing a solution properly, you will need refactoring. So the fact that you're not doing something means you need something. So you remember in the beginning, in that definition, that simple recipe of TDD, you would just implement the behavior to pass the test as simply as possible. And now you need refactoring. So refactoring is needed because of the process that you just did, right? So you've done a process that now requires as an output more refactoring. Reworking functionality or adding behavior to a system is not refactoring, but only when you can add behavior to a system without refactoring. So sometimes, like, this is really difficult because when you created the structure, a function, a class, something like that, you didn't intend a certain behavior or some kind of functionality. And when you do need to add some functionality, you need to change the factoring, you need to change the structure, maybe the design pattern, split the class, and so on. And so the behavior and that feature you're building and the structure or architecture of how you're doing is much more coupled when you're not thinking deliberately about it. So refactoring again and again, not necessarily once or twice or three times, but when it becomes part of your behavior, it is definitely a code smell, because you're inducing it. You're actually saying, I'm doing something in a technique that requires me to do refactoring. And refactoring is change, and because of change, I'm having a test to deal with the change, and that is expensive, so my test helps me do that change. But you didn't need to do that test or the way that you wrote that code in the first place. You could have just written the code in a good design in the right places, and therefore you did not need to refactor. And if you did not need to refactor so often, you may not have needed the tests as often. And if you only need the tests in a limited capacity, perhaps you could have written one and then thrown it away, or perhaps not written a test but just eyeballed it, right? Or get somebody else to double check it, or a tester to have a look at it. So there are various ways. The more you need to refactor, the more you need these tests, but it's self-fulfilling. So TDD is claimed as good because you can refactor as often as you want, and you can maintain the behavior, right? So you can just go ahead and refactor. But refactoring is a code smell. How often do you want to be refactoring, right? Redesigning the structure and all that. How often do you want to do that? How wrong can you get it? Like, I understand that we'll never get things in a perfect way and no one can design the structure outright. But if you feel that it's the best thing to do, where you're designing a test to guarantee that you can change code so that you can refactor, and you're in that cycle, are you not saying that refactoring is inevitable? I will never get it right. I will always have refactoring to do, and therefore I'm going to give up on that. I'm not going to think ahead and design something properly. I'm just going to rely on refactoring. And then refactoring becomes this excuse where I don't have to think ahead and properly and do it better. I can just refactor. So I feel that it's giving up. It's a code smell. If you're testing behavior and not structure, this is a little bit about kind of the dichotomy you're facing. If you're testing behavior and not structure, then how do you call code to initiate the behavior? If you're not aware of the structure, right? Or how do you call code to initiate the behavior if you're not aware of the structure? And if you are aware, you're coupled. It is not foolproof, although the very best can work around and through this problem for some benefit. The vast majority of code that I've come across, most of it falls short. Most of it is just a unit test with a mixture of behavior, structure, who cares? It's testing something, it's testing a feature. That's the vast majority. If you go in businesses and code bases, nobody's doing this perfectly. Everyone thinks they are. Illusory superiority. I'm one of the better drivers, right? I'm above average. Everyone believes they are. And I say, well, if you need to refactor, you've not designed the core structure or the architecture well enough, right? And this goes against the closed for modification, open for extension rule, right? If you're going to abide by that rule, you really should design the structure so that you don't have to modify it so often. It is correct, and then it is stable. And then you go and add extensions to what is stable. You don't modify what is stable. So if you're modifying this code all the time, you are going against the open-closed principle. Refactoring is a code smell. It says that you've badly designed something or you've incorrectly designed it, frequently wrong at design, but requires tests because then I can correct myself. Inducing change to the architecture and structure of a system is strange considering how most things in business software are pretty easy to design in the first place. It's not rocket science, most business software, but here we are inducing change, inducing change. And if you're saying this all the time, if you're saying, I'll refactor this later, I'm doing it, oh, the test passed, I'll refactor it later, and then you refactor, and then you also think, feedback comes in, I'll refactor that later, then it's definitely a sign that you're a terrible designer, or at least you're in an environment where design cannot be done properly. And that in itself is bad. Refactoring is a code smell. Thank you for watching. I'm Jonathan. This is The Business of Software.